Think you know everything about Brooklyn's most famous classroom? From a tragic Groucho Marx incident that reduced cast members to tears, to John Travolta's mother trying to sabotage his career-making role, to the show being completely banned in an entire city due to racial fears. Welcome back. Kotter harbored secrets that would shock even the Sweathogs themselves. Fact 1. The show's title exists because nothing rhymed with Kotter. The hit sitcom that launched John Travolta's career almost had a completely different name. And the reason for the last-minute change reveals just how much trouble a simple rhyming problem can cause in television production. When creators were developing the show in 1975, they planned to call it simply Kotter, after the main character played by comedian Gabe Kaplan, who returns to teach at his old Brooklyn high school. The producers hired John Sebastian, the former lead singer of the folk rock band The Lovin' Spoonful, to write the theme song for their new classroom comedy. Sebastian had already proven his songwriting skills with hits like Do You Believe in Magic and Summer in the City, so the job seemed straightforward enough. However, when Sebastian sat down to craft lyrics around the title Kotter, he quickly discovered a frustrating creative roadblock that would change television history. No matter how hard he tried, Sebastian simply could not find any words that rhymed well with Kotter. The closest options he could come up with were clunky choices like otter, blotter, or daughter, but none of these words worked naturally in a song about a teacher returning to his alma mater. After struggling with this rhyming challenge for what felt like an eternity, Sebastian made a creative decision that would reshape the entire project. Instead of forcing awkward rhymes around Kotter, Sebastian completely changed his approach and wrote a warm, nostalgic song about the universal experience of returning to a place from your past. He called this new composition Welcome Back, and the melody and lyrics flowed naturally around themes of homecoming, memories, and second chances. When the producers heard Sebastian's finished song, they were so impressed with the result that they decided to rename their entire television series Welcome Back, Kotter, to match the theme song that had accidentally become the heart of their show. Fact 2. Groucho Marx's heartbreaking final performance attempt. One of the most tragic behind-the-scenes moments in Welcome Back Kotter's history involved comedy legend Groucho Marx, and what would have been his final television appearance before his death. The connection between Marx and the show ran deeper than most viewers realized, since Gabe Kaplan frequently performed Groucho Marx impressions throughout the series, complete with the signature eyebrow movements, cigar gestures, and rapid-fire wisecracks that had made Marx famous decades earlier. In 1976, the show's producers arranged for the 86-year-old Marx to make a special cameo appearance in an episode titled Sadie Hawkins Day. The planned scene was designed to be a perfect moment of television magic, where Kotter would be doing one of his usual Groucho impressions in front of the Sweathogs, when the real Groucho Marx would suddenly walk into the classroom and react to seeing someone imitate his famous routine. However, when Marx arrived at the studio for filming, everyone present immediately realized that something was terribly wrong. The once sharp comedian who had entertained audiences for over 50 years appeared extremely frail and confused, showing clear signs of the mental and physical decline that had been affecting him in his final years. Witnesses on the set reported that Marx seemed disoriented and was unable to remember his lines or even understand what was happening around him. The situation became so uncomfortable and heartbreaking that some cast members and crew workers actually began crying as they watched this comedy icon struggle with what should have been a simple appearance. The producers quickly made the difficult decision to cancel the planned scene entirely, realizing that Marx was simply too weak and confused to perform even the basic requirements of his cameo. Despite the canceled filming, publicity photos were taken of Marx with the cast during his visit to the set, but these images were never released to the public because his frail and deteriorated appearance was considered too shocking and sad for fans to see. Fact 3. Boston completely banned the show over racial fears. When Welcome Back Kotter premiered on September 9, 1975, viewers across America tuned in to watch the new comedy about a Brooklyn teacher and his diverse group of students, but residents of Boston were completely left out because their local television station refused to broadcast the show. The reason for this unprecedented censorship had nothing to do with the content being inappropriate or offensive, but rather stemmed from the explosive racial tensions that were tearing the city apart during one of the most volatile periods in Boston's modern history. In 1974, a federal court had ordered Boston's public schools to desegregate through a process called forced busing, which meant students would be transported to schools outside their neighborhoods to achieve racial integration. This court mandate triggered massive protests, riots, and violence throughout the city, as many white families violently opposed having their children attend school with black students or having black students bused into their neighborhoods. The head of Boston's ABC affiliate, WCVB Television, looked at Welcome Back Kotter's integrated classroom featuring white, black, Puerto Rican, and Jewish students all getting along as friends and made a shocking decision. Station executives believed that showing a fictional integrated classroom where students from different racial and ethnic backgrounds worked together peacefully might somehow make the real-life school busing crisis even worse, by encouraging more integration or by angering people who opposed it. A press representative for the station explained their position by saying that while they did not consider the program offensive in any way, the station's vice president and general manager Robert Bennett had acted independently because of their local school situation. Gabe Kaplan himself called the station's decision the worst kind of censorship and pointed out that there was really nothing controversial about the series. After 4 weeks of refusing to air the show, the Boston affiliate finally realized that the Sweathogs were more like harmless comedy characters than dangerous troublemakers and began broadcasting Welcome Back Kotter, starting with the 5th episode. Fact 4. Travolta's mother fought against his star, making role. The role that would transform John Travolta from an unknown actor into a global superstar almost never happened because the person closest to him was actively working against it. Helen Cecilia Burke Travolta, John's mother, was herself an experienced actress and drama teacher who had performed with a radio vocal group called the Sunshine Sisters, and later taught high school drama and English, so she understood the entertainment industry better than most parents of aspiring actors. When 21-year-old John Travolta was offered the part of Vinnie Barbarino in 1975, his mother immediately recognized the potential dangers of accepting such a specific character type. Helen Travolta was genuinely worried that playing the cocky, dim-witted Italian-American teenager would lock her son into a narrow acting category that would be impossible to escape from later in his career, essentially destroying his chances of becoming a serious dramatic actor before he even got started. As an acting teacher, Helen had probably seen countless talented performers get trapped playing the same type of character over and over again, because audiences and casting directors could not imagine them in different roles. She feared that Vinnie Barbarino's exaggerated personality, distinctive Brooklyn accent, and memorable catchphrases like "up your nose with a rubber hose" would become so strongly associated with her son that he would never be able to play anyone else. Despite his mother's concerns and active discouragement, John Travolta decided to ignore her advice and take the role that would change his life forever. Helen's fears about typecasting turned out to be completely wrong, as Travolta's success on Welcome Back Kotter actually opened doors to a wide variety of film roles, including the dramatic performance in Saturday Night Fever that earned him an Academy Award nomination, proving that sometimes even the most well-intentioned parental guidance can be misguided when it comes to show business opportunities. Fact 5. The real Sweathogs. Name had a disgusting origin. The memorable nickname Sweathogs that became synonymous with Welcome Back Kotter's lovable group of remedial students actually came from Gabe Kaplan's genuinely unpleasant high school experience at New Utrecht High School in Brooklyn during the 1950s. Unlike the fictional James Buchanan High School portrayed in the television series, Kaplan's real school had a very specific and uncomfortable problem with how they housed their remedial education classes that would inspire one of television's most famous group names. At New Utrecht High School, the administrators made the decision to place all of the remedial classes on the very top floor of the building, essentially isolating the students who were struggling academically from the rest of the school population. This arrangement might have seemed logical from an organizational standpoint, but it created a serious physical comfort problem that made attending these classes nearly unbearable during warmer months of the school year. The building was constructed during an era when air conditioning was not a standard feature in public schools, which meant that the top floor became extremely hot and stuffy, as heat naturally rose from the lower floors and got trapped under the roof. Students attending remedial classes on this upper level found themselves constantly sweating profusely during their lessons, especially during the spring and early fall when outside temperatures were warm but not cold enough to provide natural cooling. The combination of poor ventilation, trapped heat, and the stress of being in remedial classes created an environment where students were literally dripping with sweat throughout their school day. The nickname Sweathogs emerged naturally from this uncomfortable situation as the students began referring to themselves as people who sweated like farm animals due to their miserable classroom conditions. When Kaplan developed his stand-up comedy routine about his high school years and later created the television series, he kept this authentic detail from his real experience, knowing that the name perfectly captured both the physical discomfort and the outsider status that these students felt during their time in school. Fact 6. Charlie's Angels stars almost changed TV history. Two of the women who would become the most famous television stars of the 1970s came very close to joining Welcome Back, Kotter instead of Charlie's Angels, which would have completely changed the landscape of popular culture during that decade. When casting directors were holding auditions for the role of Julie Kotter, the supportive wife of Gabe Kaplan's character, they saw dozens of actresses who were hoping to land what seemed like a steady supporting role on a promising new sitcom. Among the actresses who auditioned for this part were Farrah Fawcett and Kate Jackson, both of whom were working actors looking for their big break in television. At the time of these auditions in 1975, neither woman was particularly well known to television audiences, though Jackson had appeared in some guest roles on various shows, and Fawcett had done commercial work and small parts in movies and television series. The casting directors ultimately decided to give the role of Julie Kotter to Marcia Strassman, who had previous experience in both television and film and seemed like the right fit for the character of a patient Brooklyn wife dealing with her husband's unconventional teaching methods and the constant stream of teenagers visiting their apartment. Strassman's background in comedy and her ability to play both supportive and exasperated made her the natural choice for the role. Meanwhile, Fawcett and Jackson both moved on to audition for other projects, and within months they had been cast as two of the three leads in Charlie's Angels, which premiered in September 1976 and immediately became one of the biggest television phenomena of the decade. The irony of this casting situation becomes even more interesting when you consider that Strassman and Jackson actually became good friends after their careers took different paths, with Jackson even giving Strassman a motorcycle as a 30th birthday gift, though this gesture unfortunately led to a serious accident that left Strassman with facial injuries requiring surgery. Fact 7. Steve Guttenberg was Travolta's stunt double in toy commercials. Long before Steve Guttenberg became famous for his starring role in the Police Academy movies, the 18-year-old aspiring actor found himself filling in for John Travolta in one of the most unusual casting situations in television commercial history. In 1976, when Welcome Back, Kotter had become a massive hit and merchandise companies were rushing to capitalize on the show's popularity, Ideal Toys created a board game based on the series that they wanted to promote with a television commercial. The toy company's marketing team came up with the idea of creating an advertisement that would feature actors portraying the Sweathogs playing their own board game, which seemed like a natural way to connect the television show with the product they were trying to sell. However, when it came time to film the commercial, John Travolta was not available to appear as Vinnie Barbarino, either due to scheduling conflicts with the television show or other professional commitments that prevented him from participating in the toy advertisement. Rather than scrapping their concept or finding a completely different approach, the advertising agency decided to hire Steve Guttenberg to step in as Travolta's replacement and play the Barbarino character for the commercial. Guttenberg, who was just starting his acting career and looking for any opportunity to gain experience and exposure, took on the challenge of imitating Travolta's distinctive performance style and mannerisms that had made Vinnie Barbarino such a popular character. In the finished commercial, Guttenberg successfully delivered Barbarino's most famous catchphrase, saying "up your nose with a rubber hose," while promoting the board game that was advertised as the "up your nose with a rubber hose" game. Also appearing in this same commercial was Thomas Carter, who would later become known for his role in the basketball-themed television series The White Shadow, but was playing the part of Freddie "Boom Boom" Washington for this particular toy advertisement. Fact 8. The producer manipulated stars into hating each other. Behind the scenes of Welcome Back, Kotter, executive producer James Comack was secretly playing a dangerous psychological game with his two lead actors that could have destroyed the show's on-screen chemistry and working relationships. Comack, who had previously produced other successful sitcoms like Chico and The Man, apparently believed that creating tension between cast members would somehow improve their performances or make the production process more interesting for him to manage. The manipulation began when Comack started having separate conversations with Gabe Kaplan and Marcia Strassman. who played the married couple Gabe and Julie Kotter at the center of the series. During these private discussions, Komack would tell each actor that the other one had complained about working with them or had expressed negative feelings about their performance, their professionalism, or their contribution to the show. This scheme continued for an unknown period of time, with both Kaplan and Strassman believing that their co-star genuinely disliked them based on the false information that Komack was feeding them during these conversations. The situation became so uncomfortable that it affected their working relationship and probably influenced the tension that viewers could sometimes sense between their characters during certain episodes of the series. The truth about Komack's manipulation finally came to light in 1978, when Marcia Strassman gave an interview to People magazine in which she publicly criticized both the show and Gabe Kaplan, saying that she did not get along with him and that she disliked working on the series. After Kaplan read this interview, he decided to reach out to Strassman directly to address the situation, and during their conversation, they both discovered that Komack had been deliberately misleading them about each other's feelings. Once Kaplan and Strassman realized what had been happening, they were able to clear the air and understand that their supposed mutual dislike had been entirely manufactured by their producers, behind-the-scenes manipulation. Fact 9. A real teacher begged to cancel the show. Ron Palillo's portrayal of Arnold Horshack created one of television's most memorable characters, but it also made life miserable for at least one real teacher who was dealing with the consequences of the show's popularity in her own classroom. Horshack's distinctive laugh, which sounded like a series of high-pitched gasps that resembled someone desperately trying to catch their breath, became the character's most famous trait, and was instantly recognizable to anyone who had ever watched Welcome Back, Kotter. What made Horshack's laugh even more remarkable was that Palillo had completely improvised it during his original audition for the show, creating the sound on the spot as a way to make his character stand out from all the other actors who were trying out for the same role. The laugh was supposed to represent Horshack's eagerness and excitement whenever he wanted to answer a question in class, and it perfectly captured the character's nerdy enthusiasm and desperate desire for attention from his teacher. However, this iconic television moment had unexpected real-world consequences that Palillo discovered when he started receiving fan mail from viewers across the country. Among the letters praising his performance and asking for autographs, Palillo found a much less pleasant message from a frustrated teacher who was experiencing serious problems in her own classroom because of his character's influence on her students. The teacher wrote to Palillo explaining that her students had begun constantly imitating Horshack's annoying laugh during class, disrupting lessons and making it nearly impossible for her to maintain order or focus on teaching. The situation had become so unbearable that she felt compelled to write directly to the actor responsible for creating this problem, telling him in her letter, "I sometimes wish your show had never come on the air." This complaint highlighted an unexpected side effect of the show's success, as Palillo found himself being approached by strangers in restaurants and other public places who would demand that he perform Arnold's trademark laugh for their entertainment. Fact 10. The cast were ancient teenagers. One of the most obvious problems with Welcome Back, Kotter that became increasingly difficult to ignore as the series continued was the fact that the actors playing high school students were actually well into their 20s when the show began filming in 1975. This casting decision, which was common in television and movies to avoid the complications of working with actual teenage actors, created a situation where supposed 17 and 18-year-old students looked more like they should be teaching the class rather than sitting in the desks. Robert Haggis, who played the tough Puerto Rican Jewish student Juan Epstein, was already 24 years old when he started the role, while Ron Palillo, who portrayed the nerdy Arnold Horshack, was 26 and rapidly approaching 30 as the series progressed through its 4-season run. Even John Travolta, who was the youngest of the main Sweathog actors, was 21 when the show premiered, making him older than many actual high school graduates. The age problem became even more ridiculous as the years passed, and the show's premise required these clearly adult men to continue playing students who were supposedly still struggling to graduate from high school. By the time the series reached its 3rd season, Ron Palillo was pushing 30 years old while still trying to convince audiences that he was a teenage student who had trouble with basic academic subjects. Gabe Kaplan, who co-created and starred in the series, later acknowledged that this casting issue contributed significantly to the show's declining popularity and eventual cancellation. He specifically blamed the aging actors for making the show's premise increasingly unbelievable, noting that audiences could clearly see that these were grown men pretending to be teenagers rather than actual young people struggling with the challenges of high school education. The situation became so apparent that even loyal fans of the show began to question why these obviously mature adults were still sitting in a remedial high school classroom instead of moving on to adult responsibilities. Fact 11. A failed spin-off created TV's shortest live series. Welcome Back Kotter's success led television executives to attempt one of the most premature and poorly conceived spin-off series in broadcasting history, creating a show that would become legendary for all the wrong reasons. In 1976, when the original series was still riding high in the ratings, ABC decided to capitalize on the popularity by creating a spin-off called Mr. T and Tina, which was based on a character who had appeared in exactly one episode of the parent show. The character in question was Taro Takahashi, a brilliant Japanese inventor who was nicknamed Mr. T and had been played by Pat Morita in a single Welcome Back Kotter episode titled Career Day. Morita, who would later become famous for his role as Mr. Miyagi in the Karate Kid movies, was already a recognizable character actor who had played Arnold the diner owner on Happy Days, so the network felt confident that he could carry his own series. The premise of Mr. T and Tina followed Takahashi as he moved to Chicago with his family and tried to adapt to American culture while working as an inventor, with much of the comedy supposedly coming from cultural misunderstandings and family situations. However, the show suffered from weak writing, stereotypical character development, and a complete lack of connection to the original Welcome Back Kotter series that had supposedly inspired it. Critics and audiences immediately rejected the new series, finding it unfunny and offensive in its portrayal of Japanese-American characters, and the ratings were so poor that ABC canceled the show after broadcasting only 5 episodes. This made Mr. T and Tina one of the shortest-lived series in television history and demonstrated the dangers of rushing spin-offs into production without properly developing the characters or ensuring that there was enough material from the original appearance to sustain an entire series. The failure also highlighted how network executives sometimes misunderstood what made the original show successful. Fact 12. President Carter publicly humiliated the show. One of the most embarrassing moments in Welcome Back Kotter's history occurred when Gabe Kaplan received what should have been the ultimate honor for any television star: an invitation to visit the White House and meet the President of the United States. In 1977, when the show was at the peak of its popularity and had become a genuine cultural phenomenon, President Jimmy Carter invited Kaplan to the White House as part of the administration's efforts to connect with popular entertainment figures and show that the president was in touch with what ordinary Americans were watching on television. Kaplan was understandably excited about this prestigious opportunity and probably spent considerable time preparing for what he expected would be a memorable and positive experience that he could treasure for the rest of his life. Meeting the president was the kind of recognition that confirmed just how successful and influential Welcome Back Kotter had become, representing the show's impact on American culture and its ability to reach audiences across all levels of society. However, when the moment finally arrived for President Carter to acknowledge Kaplan and his television series during their meeting, the president made a mistake that immediately turned what should have been a proud moment into an awkward and embarrassing situation. Instead of correctly referring to the students in Kaplan's fictional classroom as the Sweathogs, President Carter mistakenly called them the Groundhogs, completely mangling the name that had become synonymous with the show's identity. This presidential mix-up was particularly painful because it suggested that Carter was not actually familiar with the show he was supposedly honoring, and it made Kaplan look foolish in front of other guests and White House staff members who witnessed the exchange. The incident became even more embarrassing when Carter told Kaplan, "And when you go back to California and say hello to the Groundhogs," further demonstrating his confusion about both the show's characters and Kaplan's actual place of residence. Fact 13. Marcia Strassman literally prayed for cancellation. One of the most shocking revelations about Welcome Back Kotter's behind-the-scenes drama came when Marcia Strassman, who played Gabe Kotter's supportive wife Julie throughout the series, went public with her intense hatred for the show that had made her famous. In a 1978 interview with People magazine, Strassman made the stunning admission that she actively hoped for the series to fail, telling the publication that she prayed every day for a cancellation because she found working on the show so unbearable. Strassman's role as Julie Kotter was supposed to be the heart of the show's domestic scenes, where she would react to her husband's stories about his crazy students and deal with the Sweathogs, constantly showing up at their Brooklyn apartment through the fire escape window. However, instead of enjoying her steady job on a popular television series, Strassman apparently found the work environment so unpleasant that she was willing to sacrifice her career prospects just to escape from the situation. The actress specifically targeted Gabe Kaplan in her complaints, stating that she did not get along with him and expressing her strong dislike for working with the show's star and co-creator. Her frustration with Kaplan was so intense that she actively tried to get herself released from her contract, essentially attempting to quit the show, even though doing so could have damaged her reputation in Hollywood and made it difficult for her to find other television work. Strassman's public criticism was particularly damaging because it came from someone who was supposed to be part of the show's core family dynamic, and her willingness to speak so negatively about the series in a major magazine suggested that there were serious problems with the production that went far beyond normal workplace disagreements. Her comments also revealed that what appeared to be a happy and successful television family was actually filled with tension and conflict that viewers never suspected while watching the show. Fact 14. The Marx Brothers inspired the characters' personalities. The creators and actors of Welcome Back, Kotter deliberately drew inspiration from one of comedy's most famous groups when developing the personalities and interactions of their main characters, using the Marx Brothers as a template to create believable relationships while also deflecting potential criticism about ethnic stereotypes. This connection was not accidental or coincidental, but rather a conscious creative decision that helped shape the show's comedic tone and character dynamics throughout its 4-season run. Gabe Kaplan, who was a lifelong fan of the Marx Brothers, made Groucho Marx impressions a regular part of his character's routine, incorporating the classic comedian's distinctive eyebrow movements, cigar gestures, and rapid-fire wisecracks into nearly every episode of the series. Kaplan's admiration for Groucho was so strong that he would later star in a stage play about the legendary comedian's life, demonstrating just how deeply this influence had affected his own comedic style and performance approach. Robert Hegius, who played Juan Epstein, took a similar approach by deliberately modeling his character after Chico Marx, the piano-playing brother known for his Italian accent and streetwise personality. Hegius openly acknowledged that he suggested the Sweathogs should be based on the Marx Brothers specifically as a way to reduce the tension and controversy that might arise from the show's portrayal of different ethnic groups, since audiences were already familiar with and comfortable with the Marx Brothers' comedic personas. This strategy proved effective because it allowed the show to present diverse characters without seeming to mock or stereotype real ethnic communities, since the performances were clearly rooted in established comedy traditions rather than attempting to create authentic portrayals of specific cultural groups. The Marx Brothers connection also gave the actors a solid foundation for their character relationships, since the original comedy team had already proven that these personality types could work together successfully to create entertaining situations that appealed to broad audiences across different backgrounds. Fact 15. Both lead stars abandoned their own show. The fourth and final season of Welcome Back, Kotter created one of the most unusual situations in television history when both of the show's main stars essentially abandoned their own series due to behind-the-scenes conflicts and career priorities. What made this situation particularly bizarre was that the show was literally named after Gabe Kaplan's character and centered around his relationship with the Sweathogs, yet by 1978, neither Kaplan nor John Travolta was willing to participate in the majority of episodes. Gabe Kaplan's departure from his own show stemmed from major contract disputes with executive producer James Komack, who had been involved in manipulating the cast relationships and making creative decisions that Kaplan strongly disagreed with throughout the series. Kaplan was so frustrated with the direction of the show and his working relationship with Komack that he decided to break his contract and drastically reduce his appearances, appearing in only 8 of the season's 23 episodes. Meanwhile, John Travolta was dealing with his own career transition, as his movie success with Saturday Night Fever and Grease had made him one of Hollywood's biggest stars, leading him to focus more attention on his film career than on television work. Travolta appeared in only 10 episodes of the final season, and when he did show up, he was credited as a special guest star rather than a regular cast member, earning $2,000 for each appearance. To explain these absences, the show's writers created storylines where Kotter had been promoted to vice principal and was therefore spending less time in the classroom, while Vinnie Barbarino got a job as a hospital orderly and moved into his own apartment. The series also introduced a new character named Beau de la Barre, played by Stephen Shortridge, to fill the void left by Travolta's departure. But the damage to the show's central premise was irreversible, and Welcome Back, Kotter was cancelled at the end of this troubled final season.